Commander stood before the massive viewing screen on his flagship, the Dominion's Edge. His 6 eyes scanned the star charts showing the Sol system, another primitive world to conquer, another species to bring under hegemony control. He had done this 17 times before, and each time felt easier than the last. The bridge crew worked quietly around him. His officers knew better than to disturb their commander when he studied a new target. His reputation in the hegemony fleet was built on efficiency. No unnecessary deaths, no wasted resources, no prolonged battles. He conquered worlds the way others harvested crops, methodically and completely. "Sir, the intelligence report is ready," announced Lieutenant, his communications officer. Nodded and activated his personal display. The data scrolled across his screen in neat columns. Species name, human. Population, approximately 8 billion. Technology level, primitive space travel, basic energy weapons, chemical propulsion systems. Military organization, fragmented into numerous small nations with separate armies. He almost laughed. 8 billion individuals scattered across hundreds of different governments, all fighting among themselves. Their weapons were so basic that his ship's hull could barely register their impact. Their fastest ships would take them months to travel distances his fleet covered in days. "Assessment," he asked his tactical officer. "Standard Class 3 developing threat, sir. Estimated conquest time, 3 to 5 days. Recommended force deployment, minimal. Perhaps 2 battle cruisers and a handful of support vessels." Studied the human military data. Their largest weapons could destroy cities, but they had never fought in space. Their soldiers carried simple projectile weapons that fired metal slugs. Some of their vehicles still used wheels instead of proper hover technology. Most amusing of all, they seemed to fight wars over resources they could easily share, and ideas that had no physical value. "What about their response to our standard ultimatum?" asked. Lieutenant pulled up the communication logs. "We transmitted the surrender demand in their most common languages 72 hours ago, sir. Their response was uniform across all their government entities." "Uniform? That's unusual for a fragmented species." "Yes, sir. Every nation, every military organization, every leader gave the same basic response. They rejected our terms." His mandibles clicked together in what passed for a smile among his people. Of course they did. They always reject the first offer. It's a natural response when a primitive species first encounters superior technology. They need to see our power before they understand reality. He had seen this pattern many times. A species would refuse to surrender, thinking they could fight. Then, after losing their first few battles, they would realize the futility of resistance. The smart ones surrendered quickly. The stubborn ones fought a little longer before accepting the inevitable. Either way, the outcome was always the same. "Sir, there is one unusual detail in their rejection," continued. "Oh." "They didn't just refuse our terms. They also made counter-demands." This was new. Had never heard of a primitive species making demands of the hegemony. What did they want? "They demanded that we leave their system immediately. They stated that any further approach toward their worlds would be considered an act of war, and that they would respond with, quote, all necessary force." His laugh echoed across the bridge. His crew joined in politely. All necessary force. What could these primitives possibly do with their chemical rockets and metal projectiles? "Did they specify what this necessary force would include?" he asked. "They were quite detailed, sir. Every nation submitted military specifications. Total armed forces number approximately 150 million individuals. They possess approximately 40,000 aircraft, 60,000 ground vehicles, and 3,000 naval vessels. Space-capable military assets number exactly 0. 0 space weapons," shook his head. "They're threatening us with forces that can't even reach our ships." "There's more, sir." The communications included messages from individual humans. Civilians, apparently. The translation software estimates we received over 2 billion separate transmissions. 2 billion, even was surprised by this number. Yes, sir. The vast majority contained similar content, expressions of defiance, promises to fight. Some included what our cultural analysis team believes are insults, though many don't translate properly. Was intrigued despite himself. He had never seen a species where civilians bothered to respond to military ultimatums. Usually, only governments and military leaders communicated with the hegemony. Show me a sample of these civilian messages. The screen displayed a random selection, translated into hegemony standard language. Read through them quickly. Come and take it. You'll have to go through me first. From my cold, dead hands. Make me. Most were short, angry responses. Some were longer, describing what the humans would do to any hegemony forces that approached their world. The threats were creative, if impossible to carry out. Curious, mused. Their civilians are responding as if they intend to fight personally. Yes, sir. Cultural analysis suggests this is normal behavior for this species. They appear to have a concept called citizen soldiers, where civilian populations participate in military defense. Inefficient, decided. Civilians lack proper training and equipment. They would only get in the way of real military forces. His tactical officer nodded. Agreed, sir. If anything, this makes our task easier. Untrained fighters are less effective than no fighters at all. Return to studying the star charts. The Sol system had 4 rocky planets and 4 gas giants. The humans lived primarily on the 3rd planet, with small colonies on 2 others and various space stations. Their industrial capacity was spread across their home world, making it impossible to cripple their production with a single strike. Fleet status, he asked. All ships ready for deployment, sir. Weapons charged, shields active, troops prepared for ground assault if needed. Ground assault won't be necessary, said confidently. Once we destroy their orbital defenses and a few of their cities, they'll surrender. They always do. He turned away from the screen and walked to his command chair. Around him, his officers prepared for another routine conquest. The humans had made their choice. Now they would learn the price of defying the hegemony. Set course for the Sol system, he commanded. Standard approach speed. We'll give them time to reconsider their position as we approach. The Dominion's Edge and its escort fleet turned toward Earth, settled into his chair and began composing his preliminary report to the Hegemony Council. Another primitive world about to join the Empire. Another species about to learn their place in the galactic order. He had no idea that everything he thought he knew about war was about to change. The first battle happened exactly as it expected, almost. His fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system to find the humans waiting. They had positioned their defense forces around their moon, using a space station as their primary base. Luna Station, his intelligence officers called it. The humans had managed to gather about 200 ships of various sizes. Studied their formation through his tactical display. Their ships were indeed primitive, just as the reports had indicated. Crude metal hulls with chemical thrusters. Their weapons appeared to be kinetic projectiles and basic energy beams. Most of their vessels were clearly converted civilian craft, hastily fitted with military equipment. Their formation is surprisingly organized, his tactical officer observed, for a primitive species. Nodded. The humans had arranged their ships in defensive layers, with their larger vessels protecting the smaller ones. It was a reasonable strategy, though ultimately futile against hegemony technology. Open communications, he ordered. Let me speak to their commander. The main screen showed a human face within moments. The being had only 2 eyes, pale skin, and hair growing from the top of its head. It wore a uniform of some kind, with various symbols didn't recognize. I am Admiral Sarah of the United Earth Defense Force, the human said in accented but understandable galactic standard. You are trespassing in sovereign human territory. I am commander of the Hegemony Enforcement Fleet, he replied formally. You have rejected our terms. We are here to enforce compliance. The human studied him for a moment. Commander, you're making a mistake. We don't want to fight, but we won't surrender our freedom. I'm giving you one final chance to withdraw. Impossible. Your resistance is noted but irrelevant. Surrender now and your casualties will be minimal. His expression changed. Had seen similar looks before on other species facing the same situation, but something was different about this one. Most species showed fear or anger at this point. This human looked sad. I'm sorry you feel that way, said. All units weapons free, protect the civilians. The communication ended, gestured to his weapons officer. Begin the attack, standard suppression pattern. What followed should have been a simple demonstration of superior firepower. Ships opened fire with focused energy beams that could slice through human vessels like they were made of paper. The first wave of attacks destroyed several dozen human ships in seconds. But the humans didn't break formation. Instead, they did something had never seen before. The smaller ships, the ones that were clearly civilian vessels with minimal weapons, moved to protect the larger military ships. Cargo haulers and passenger transports threw themselves between hegemony weapons and human warships. They were sacrificing themselves to protect others. Sir, this is tactically unsound, his tactical officer said, confusion clear in his voice. They're using their weakest units to shield their strongest ones. It makes no strategic sense. Watched as a human civilian transport, its hull already breached and atmosphere venting, rammed itself into one of his escort vessels. The transport was destroyed instantly, but it managed to damage his ship's shields. Perhaps they're trying to buy time, he mused, or maybe they don't understand proper military doctrine. The battle continued, and the pattern repeated itself over and over. Human ships would fight until they were completely destroyed, rather than retreating when heavily damaged. When their weapons failed, they tried to ram hegemony vessels. When their engines died, they used their remaining power to send warnings to other human ships. Most puzzling of all were the communications crew intercepted. Human ships weren't discussing tactics or reporting damage. They were saying things like, "Tell my family I love them," and "Make sure the children get to the escape pods first." Sir, the humans are prioritizing non-combatant evacuation, reported his intelligence officer. They're moving civilian personnel away from the battle zone, even when it puts their military assets at risk. This was definitely not normal military behavior. Every species had fought before tried to save their most valuable military resources first. Civilians were usually considered acceptable losses if it meant preserving fighting capacity. Are they trying to preserve their leadership class? He asked. No, sir. The evacuees appear to be random civilians. Families, elderly individuals, children. No apparent military or political importance. Within 3 hours, Luna Station was in hegemony hands. The human defense fleet was mostly destroyed, with the survivors retreating toward Earth. It had been a complete victory, exactly as planned. But felt uneasy as he reviewed the battle reports. The humans had lost, but they hadn't fought like a losing force. They had fought like they were trying to protect something more important than victory. Casualties, he asked. Human losses. 147 ships destroyed, approximately 30,000 personnel killed or captured. Hegemony losses. 1 escort vessel heavily damaged, 12 ships with minor damage, 437 personnel wounded, 52 killed. His mandibles clicked in surprise. 52 killed from those primitive weapons. Yes, sir. The humans demonstrated unexpected effectiveness in close combat. Several of their ships managed to inflict significant damage through ramming attacks and concentrated fire. This was concerning. Previous conquests had usually resulted in minimal hegemony casualties. Primitive species simply didn't possess weapons capable of seriously threatening modern warships. What about prisoners? We captured approximately 3,000 human personnel, sir. However, interrogation has proven difficult. Difficult how? His intelligence officer hesitated. The humans refused to provide military information, sir. Standard interrogation techniques have been ineffective. They seem to have an unusual resistance to psychological pressure. Are they using some kind of mental conditioning? Unknown, sir, but several prisoners have died rather than reveal tactical information. They appear to be deliberately stopping their own hearts. Had never heard of such a thing. Suicide to avoid interrogation was theoretically possible, but most species had strong survival instincts that prevented such actions. Sir, we're receiving communications from the human, Lieutenant announced. Put it through. The screen showed another human face, this one older and wearing different symbols. This is Secretary General Martinez of the United Earth Government. We've received your demonstration at Luna Station. We reject your terms, and we demand the immediate release of our prisoners and withdrawal from our system. Your fleet has been defeated, pointed out. You have no leverage for demands. The human called Martinez smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Commander, you've won a single battle. You haven't won the war. Earth is mobilizing its full resources for defense. If you want to take our world, you'll have to fight for every meter of space. Your resistance is futile. You've seen our capabilities. And you've seen ours. We're not going to make this easy for you. After ending the communication, stared at the tactical display showing Earth. The planet was surrounded by thousands of ships now, far more than had defended Luna Station. Somehow, in just a few hours, the humans had assembled a much larger fleet. Where did all those ships come from? He asked. Unknown, sir. Our long-range sensors detect massive industrial activity on the human. They appear to be converting civilian infrastructure to military production at an unprecedented rate. Settled back in his command chair. This conquest was taking longer than expected, but the outcome remained certain. The humans were showing more resilience than most species, but they were still primitive. Their technology was still inferior. He had no way of knowing that everything he had witnessed so far was just the beginning. The humans weren't fighting to win. They were fighting to survive. And for humans, those were very different things. The news from Earth changed everything. Had expected the humans to begin surrender negotiations after losing Luna Station. Instead, his communication officers intercepted thousands of transmissions from the human that made no sense at all. Sir, you need to hear this, Lieutenant said, his voice uncertain. The main screen filled with images from human news broadcasts, watched as millions of humans gathered in public spaces, not in panic or despair, but in organized groups. They weren't fleeing from cities or hiding in shelters. They were volunteering for military service. This doesn't match normal behavioral patterns, his cultural analyst reported. After a significant military defeat, most species either surrender or retreat to protected areas. Humans are doing neither. Studied the broadcasts more carefully. In every human city, factories that had produced civilian goods were now making weapons and military equipment. Automobile plants were building armored vehicles. Electronics manufacturers were producing communication equipment and targeting systems. Even food processing facilities had been converted to produce military rations. How long has it been since our victory at Luna Station? He asked. 72 hours, sir. And they've already converted their entire industrial capacity. It appears so, sir. Our intelligence estimates suggest they've increased military production by over 3,000% in less than 3 days. This was impossible. Industrial conversion on this scale should take months, even for an advanced civilization. The humans were accomplishing it with primitive technology in a matter of hours. What about their military response? His tactical officer pulled up the latest sensor readings. Sir, Earth's defensive fleet has grown from 3,000 ships to over 15,000. They're using everything that can fly. Cargo vessels, passenger ships, mining craft, even what appear to be recreational vehicles. Recreational vehicles? Yes, sir. Pleasure craft designed for civilian entertainment, now fitted with military weapons. The construction quality is poor, but the sheer numbers are concerning. Felt a chill that had nothing to do with the bridge temperature. In his 17 previous conquests, he had never faced a species that could mobilize this quickly or this completely. Sir, we're receiving multiple communications from other hegemony commanders, announced. Other commanders? Yes, sir. It seems the humans have ships throughout their solar system. Our forces engaging human assets at Mars and Jupiter are reporting similar patterns. Activated the fleet-wide communication system. Commander appeared first, his usually calm demeanor showing signs of stress. Thank the void you're responding. We need to discuss these humans. What's your situation? Impossible is what it is. We destroyed their Mars colony's defense fleet yesterday. Today they have twice as many ships as before, and these aren't proper military vessels. They're using mining equipment as weapons platforms. Asteroid haulers fitted with military-grade particle beams. It shouldn't work, but somehow it does. Commander Al joined the communication, her face grim. The Jupiter engagement is even worse. The humans there are using ice haulers as kinetic weapons. They're accelerating cargo vessels to significant fractions of light speed and using them as projectiles. The impact damage is devastating. That's suicidal, protested. Those ships have crews. Exactly, Al replied. The crews are dying with their ships, voluntarily. They're turning themselves into guided missiles. This violated everything understood about warfare. Military assets were valuable resources to be preserved when possible. Using them as single-use weapons was wasteful and irrational. Have any of them requested surrender terms? He asked. Both commanders shook their heads, spoke first. No surrender requests, no negotiation attempts, no peace overtures. They're fighting as if defeat isn't a possibility they're willing to consider. Sir, Lieutenant interrupted, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. It's being broadcast on all frequencies simultaneously. Put it through. The screen showed a human female standing behind a podium. She wore formal clothing and had an air of authority, but could see something in her expression that bothered him. She looked determined, but also sad. I am President speaking for the people of Earth. Your forces have attacked our colonies and killed our citizens. We want you to understand something very clearly. We are not going to surrender. We are not going to negotiate. We are not going to submit to your empire. She paused, and when she continued, her voice was stronger. Every human, everywhere in this system, has made the same choice. We would rather die as free people than live as slaves. You have superior technology, but we have something you don't seem to understand. We have something worth dying for. The transmission ended, stared at the empty screen for several moments before speaking. Cultural analysis. What did she mean by something worth dying for? His analyst hesitated. Unknown, sir. The concept doesn't translate well. Humans seem to have abstract values they consider more important than survival itself. Freedom, dignity, protection of their families. They appear willing to sacrifice everything for these concepts. That's illogical. Survival is the primary drive of all intelligent life. Not for humans, sir. They seem to have priorities that override basic survival instincts. Turned back to his tactical display. Earth's defenses had grown even stronger while they talked. The humans weren't just building more ships, they were developing new tactics. "Sir, we're detecting unusual activity in the asteroid belt," his sensor officer reported. "What kind of activity?" "The humans appear to be moving asteroids, sir. Large ones. They're using mining equipment to alter orbital trajectories." "For what purpose?" "Unknown, sir. But if those asteroids were to be directed toward our fleet positions..." Blood chilled. The humans were turning their solar system itself into a weapon. They were moving celestial bodies to use as projectiles. "How long would it take to evacuate our current positions?" "Several hours, sir. But the asteroid trajectories suggest they're not targeting our current positions. They appear to be creating obstacles, blocking potential approach routes to Earth." The humans weren't trying to destroy his fleet with asteroids. They were reshaping space itself to make invasion more difficult. This level of strategic thinking was far beyond what he had expected from a primitive species. "Sir, priority communication from Hegemony Command," announced. The screen showed Grand Admiral X, Supreme Commander of Hegemony Forces. His expression was grave. "Commanders, we've been monitoring your engagement with the human species. The Council is concerned about the duration of this conquest." "Sir, the humans are proving more resistant than anticipated," reported. "Resistant? Commander, you've been fighting for 5 days. Your preliminary report estimated 3 days for complete victory. What's the delay?" Struggled to find words. How could he explain that an entire species had apparently decided to fight to extinction rather than surrender? "The humans are fighting with tactics we've never encountered, sir. They seem to have no concept of acceptable losses. They're using their entire civilization as a military asset." "Their entire civilization?" "Yes, sir. Every human appears to be participating in the war effort. Civilians are building weapons. Children are operating communication equipment. Elderly individuals are piloting supply ships. There's no distinction between military and non-military personnel." Grand Admiral X was silent for several moments. "Commander, are you telling me that an entire species has chosen to fight rather than accept hegemony rule?" "Yes, sir. That appears to be exactly what they've done." "Impossible. No species commits racial suicide over political independence." But even as X said it, could see doubt in his commander's eyes. The Grand Admiral had read the same battle reports. He knew something unprecedented was happening in the Sol system. "Continue your mission, Commander, but I want daily reports. The Council needs to understand what we're dealing with." The communication ended, leaving alone with his doubts. Around him, his crew worked quietly, but he could sense their uncertainty. They had all expected to be heading home by now, successful in another routine conquest. Instead, they were fighting an enemy that grew stronger every day, an enemy that seemed to have no limit to what they would sacrifice for victory. The mistake happened on the 7th day. Grand Admiral X had grown impatient with the slow progress in the Sol system. Against its recommendations, he ordered a direct strike against human civilian populations. The theory was simple: destroy enough cities, and even the stubborn humans would surrender to save the survivors. Watched from his command bridge as hegemony forces bombarded 3 human cities from orbit. The energy beams turned millions of human dwellings into ash in seconds. The death toll was enormous. By any reasonable military logic, this should have broken the humans' will to fight. It had the opposite effect. The change in human communications happened immediately. Where before there had been determination and defiance, now there was something else, something cold and terrible. "Sir, we're intercepting human military transmissions," Lieutenant reported, his voice shaking. "The content is disturbing." "Show me." The screen filled with images from human command centers. Could see human military leaders speaking in calm, measured tones, but their words made his blood freeze. All restrictions are now lifted, one human admiral was saying. Authorization codes Omega through Zulu are now active. Release the warheads from deep storage. Activate the Damocles protocols. Sir, what are the Damocles protocols? Asked his intelligence officer. Unknown, sir. The humans appear to have military assets they haven't used yet. Some kind of weapons they've been holding in reserve. What kind of weapons? We're not certain, sir. But energy signatures suggest they're significantly more powerful than anything we've seen them use so far. Within hours, human behavior changed completely. The desperate but organized resistance became something else entirely. Ships that had fought defensively now attacked with suicidal aggression. Vessels that should have retreated when damaged instead accelerated toward hegemony positions, their crews still fighting even as their ships broke apart around them. Sir, the humans are deploying some kind of new weapon, his tactical officer reported urgently. On the screen, watched a human ship approach one of his destroyers. The human vessel was clearly damaged, venting atmosphere and debris. It should have been retreating or requesting surrender terms. Instead, it exploded. But this wasn't the explosion of a ship being destroyed. This was deliberate. The human vessel had detonated some kind of weapon that created a sphere of energy that consumed everything within several kilometers. What was that? Demanded. Unknown technology, sir. The energy release was equivalent to a small star going supernova. Impossible. Those power levels should require technology we haven't seen from the humans. Sir, we're detecting similar energy buildups in 17 other human ships, the tactical officer said, panic creeping into his voice. Watched in horror as human vessels throughout the battle zone began exploding in the same controlled manner. Each explosion took hegemony ships with it. The humans were turning their own fleet into guided weapons of mass destruction. Are they using their ships as bombs? It appears so, sir. But these aren't conventional explosives. These energy signatures suggest they're collapsing matter itself. That's impossible with their technology level. Sir, incoming communication from the human fleet. The screen showed a human face hadn't seen before. This one was younger than the previous commanders, with scars across its face and eyes that seemed to burn with inner fire. I'm Admiral Sarah Mitchell, commanding the Human Retribution Fleet. You made a mistake when you killed our civilians. Admiral, your forces are outmatched. Surrender and prevent further bloodshed. The human's expression didn't change. Commander, you don't understand what you've done. Those weren't just cities you destroyed. Those were our homes, our families, our children. Casualties are an inevitable result of resistance. Surrender now, and we'll guarantee the safety of your remaining populations. Mitchell's laugh was terrifying. It held no humor, no warmth, only a cold promise of destruction. Commander, we're not trying to win anymore. We're trying to hurt you. We're going to hurt you so badly that you'll remember this system for the rest of your species' existence. The communication ended. What followed was unlike anything in its experience. The humans stopped fighting like a military force and started fighting like a force of nature. Ships that should have been protecting valuable assets instead threw themselves at hegemony vessels with no regard for survival. Human crew members who should have evacuated from damaged ships instead stayed to operate weapons until their vessels disintegrated around them. Most terrifyingly, the humans began deploying weapons that violated their own laws of war. Intelligence team identified biological weapons, chemical weapons, and energy weapons that the humans had apparently banned themselves from using. Until now. Sir, we're receiving reports from other commanders throughout the system, said. Similar changes in human behavior everywhere. They're fighting like they've gone insane. Tactical analysis. Sir, it's not insanity. It's calculated. The humans have shifted from a defense strategy to what can only be described as a revenge strategy. They're not trying to protect their remaining assets. They're trying to inflict maximum damage on our forces, regardless of their own losses. Watched his tactical display as hegemony forces throughout the Sol system began reporting massive casualties. Ships that had been winning battles suddenly found themselves overwhelmed by human vessels that fought beyond any rational limit. Sir, Commander is requesting emergency assistance. His fleet is being overrun. Overrun by those primitive ships. Sir, the humans appear to have some kind of psychological state that makes them exponentially more effective in combat. Our psychologists can't explain it. They seem to be thinking clearly while simultaneously showing no fear of death. On the screen, could see human ships ramming hegemony vessels at full speed. But these weren't random suicide attacks. They were precisely targeted strikes that did maximum damage to critical systems. How are they maintaining tactical effectiveness while in this state? Unknown, sir. They appear to be operating on multiple psychological levels simultaneously. Emotional fury combined with cold tactical calculation. A new alarm sounded. Sir, long-range sensors are detecting massive fleet movements throughout human space. Every colony, every outpost, every ship is converging on our positions. How many ships? 60,000 and growing, sir. They're coming from everywhere. Commercial vessels, mining ships, exploration craft, passenger transports, all armed, all heading toward us. Realized with growing horror that he wasn't fighting a military anymore. He was fighting an entire species that had transformed itself into a weapon. Sir, priority communication from the human. The screen showed President again, but she looked different now. Older, sadder, but also harder. Commander, you wanted to see what happens when humanity fights with everything we have. Now you're seeing it. Every human in this system has made the same choice. We're going to fight until you're gone or we're all dead. Madam President, this level of destruction serves no purpose. Your species will suffer enormous casualties. Yes, we will, but you'll suffer more. And when this is over, every species in the galaxy will know what happens when you threaten human families. This is madness. His expression softened slightly. No, Commander, this is love. We love our children more than we fear death. We love our freedom more than we want safety, and we'll destroy ourselves before we let you take those things away. The communication ended. Around, his bridge crew worked frantically as reports of mounting casualties poured in from across the system. Sir, Fleet Command is requesting immediate evacuation, announced. Our losses have exceeded acceptable parameters. Stared at the tactical display showing thousands of human ships converging on his position. For the first time in his military career, he felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Not fear of death, but fear of something worse. Fear of an enemy that would rather destroy everything than accept defeat. Fear of fighting creatures who valued abstract concepts more than their own survival. For the first time in hegemony history, a conquest fleet was about to retreat. All ships, he ordered quietly, prepare for emergency withdrawal. The retreat from Sol system was the most shameful moment in hegemony history. Sat in his command chair as his fleet limped away from the human, their ships damaged and their pride shattered. Behind them, the humans didn't pursue. They simply watched the hegemony forces leave, their message clear without words: don't come back. The final casualty, reports made for grim reading, had lost 60% of his fleet. Commanders and Al had suffered similar losses. Combined, the three hegemony fleets had lost more ships and personnel than in any single engagement in recorded history. And they had been defeated by a species that still used chemical propulsion and projectile weapons. Sir, Grand Admiral X is requesting a full report, Lieutenant announced. Had been dreading this moment. How could he explain what had happened? How could he describe an enemy that fought beyond reason, beyond hope, beyond survival itself? Put him through. The screen showed X, his expression unreadable. Behind him could see other high-ranking hegemony officials. The entire military command structure was watching this conversation. Commander, explain. Where could he begin? How could he make them understand? Sir, the humans are unlike any species we've encountered. They don't fight for territory, resources, or survival. They fight for abstract concepts that they value more than their own lives. Abstract concepts. Freedom, sir, family, dignity. They would rather die than give up these things. Grand Admiral X was silent for a long moment. Commander, are you telling me that an entire species chose extinction over submission to hegemony rule? Not extinction, sir. They were willing to risk extinction to protect what they considered important. There's a difference. Explain the difference. Struggled to find words. How could he explain something that had taken him days of horror to understand? Sir, every species we've conquered before fought to survive. When survival became impossible, they surrendered to preserve their lives. Humans fight for something beyond survival. When we threatened their existence, they fought harder. That's illogical. Yes, sir, but it's also effective. They're willing to accept any cost to protect their values, any sacrifice, any loss. They'll destroy themselves completely before they'll compromise on what they consider important. Another voice joined the conversation. Supreme Chancellor and the highest authority in the hegemony government. Commander, the Council needs to understand the implications of your report. Are these humans a threat to hegemony expansion? Consider the question carefully. Sir, the humans are a threat to the concept of expansion itself. They've proven that a technically inferior species can defeat hegemony forces through sheer determination and willingness to sacrifice. One victory doesn't establish a pattern. Chancellor, respectfully, it's not about the victory. It's about what the victory represents. The humans have demonstrated that some species would rather cease to exist than accept conquest. If other species learn this lesson. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone on the communication understood the implications. The hegemony's entire strategy relied on conquered species accepting defeat when resistance became too costly. If species started choosing extinction over submission, the empire would collapse. What are your recommendations, Commander? Had spent the entire journey back to hegemony space thinking about this question. Sir, I recommend permanent quarantine of the Sol system. The humans should be classified as a Class 1 existential threat and left completely alone. Existential threat, they're still a primitive species. Sir, they're primitive in technology, not in warfare. They understand something about fighting that we don't. They understand that some things are worth more than survival. Chancellor and looked skeptical. Commander, you're suggesting that the hegemony, with 10,000 years of military dominance, should fear a species that hasn't even mastered interstellar travel. Yes, sir, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. The communication fell silent. Could see the officials discussing among themselves, their voices too low to hear. Finally, Chancellor and returned his attention to the screen. Commander, you'll submit a full written report within 24 hours. Include detailed tactical analysis and cultural assessment. The Council will review your recommendations. Yes, sir. The communication ended, leaving alone with his thoughts. Around him, his crew worked quietly, preparing their own reports. No one spoke about what they had witnessed, but he could see it in their faces. They had all been changed by the encounter with humanity. Activated his personal recording system and began composing his final log entry about the Sol system engagement. Personal log, Commander, Hegemony, date 847.2. Subject, Analysis of human warfare capabilities and psychological profile. I have been a soldier for 43 years. I have conquered 17 worlds and witnessed the defeat of 3 interstellar empires. I thought I understood warfare in all its forms. I was wrong. Warfare, as practiced by every known species, is a tool for achieving political or economic goals through controlled violence. The objective is always to gain something while preserving as much of your own resources as possible. Victory is measured by the ratio of gain to cost. Humans practice warfare differently. For them, war is not about gaining resources or territory. War is about protecting what they love, and they love things that cannot be measured or ideas, principles, the right to make their own choices. When we threatened these abstract concepts, the humans became something I had never seen before. They became warriors who fought not for victory but for meaning, not for survival but for honor, not for gain but for love. This makes them the most dangerous military force in the galaxy. A species that fights for resources will surrender when the cost becomes too high. A species that fights for territory will retreat when the territory becomes indefensible. A species that fights for survival will submit when survival becomes impossible. But a species that fights for love will never surrender, never retreat, never submit. They will fight until they win or until they're all dead. And they don't seem to care which outcome they achieve, as long as they don't compromise on what they're protecting. The humans taught me something about war that I wish I had never learned. Some enemies can't be defeated because they refuse to be defeated. Some species would rather burn the galaxy than accept conquest. I thought I knew war. I knew conquest, domination, the strategic use of force to achieve political goals, but I had never encountered war as an expression of love. I had never seen warriors who fought not because they hated their enemies, but because they loved their families more than they feared death. The hegemony has spent 10,000 years learning how to break the will of other species. We know how to make them surrender through superior force or economic pressure. We know how to convince them that resistance is futile. We don't know how to fight an enemy whose will cannot be broken because their will isn't based on rational calculation. It's based on love. And love, I have learned, is stronger than fear, stronger than logic, stronger than survival itself. The humans should be left alone, not because we can't defeat them, but because defeating them would require destroying them completely. And any species capable of inspiring that level of devotion deserves to exist. End log. Leaned back in his chair and stared at the stars streaming past his viewport. Somewhere behind them, the humans were rebuilding their defenses and mourning their dead. But they were still free. 3 months later, the Hegemony Council officially established the Sol Exclusion Zone, a sphere of space around the human system that no hegemony vessel was permitted to enter. For the first time in their history, they had encountered a species they chose not to conquer. The official reason given was insufficient strategic value relative to projected costs. The real reason was simpler. They had learned the difference between enemies who fought to win and enemies who fought for love. And they had decided they never wanted to face that kind of enemy again. Retired from military service 6 months later, he spent his remaining years writing about military philosophy and the nature of warfare. His most famous work, The Warriors Who Fight for Love, became required reading at every military academy in hegemony space. He never returned to the Sol system, but he often wondered about the humans. Were they still free? Were they still willing to die for their abstract concepts? Somehow he knew they were, and that knowledge gave him a strange kind of peace. Some things he had learned were indeed worth more than survival.